Welcome to today's deep dive. So, have you ever perfectly understood an English movie, a YouTube video, or, I don't know, a colleague in a meeting, but the absolute second it's your turn to open your mouth and speak, your mind just goes completely terrifyingly blank?
Oh, yeah. It's a totally universal feeling.
Right. I mean, you know the vocabulary, you know the grammar, but your brain just hits a brick wall.
It really is one of the most frustrating experiences in the world. You experience this sudden paralysis where all the words you literally just understood a moment ago simply vanish into thin air.
It feels like a massive personal failure in the moment, like you're somehow tricking yourself into thinking you know the language.
Exactly. But today, we're figuring out how to cure that sudden paralysis. Because, well, it turns out the gap between understanding English and speaking it fluently isn't about intelligence at all.
No, not at all. It's about this bizarre neurological bottleneck.
And right out of the gate, we need to offer some reassurance here. If you're experiencing this freeze, this sudden blankness when it's time to speak, you are not failing.
Oh, that is so good to hear.
Yeah, it's actually one of the most natural, predictable stages of language learning. The sources we're diving into today emphasize a really powerful, honestly overlooked reality. If you can already understand English, you are actually halfway there.
Wow.
Your speaking ability is just in a bottlenecked growth phase.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to actually fix the problem, we first have to define what the brain is actually attempting to do when it makes that massive switch from listening to speaking.
Right.
And the material we're looking at describes listening in this incredibly poetic way. It calls it quietly collecting words inside your heart.
Quietly collecting words. I mean, that is a beautiful image. And scientifically, it points to the fact that listening is a completely passive activity.
Yeah.
When you're listening to someone, you're receiving information. Your brain is categorizing it, absorbing context, and utilizing facial expressions and tone to just fill in the blanks.
But speaking is an entirely different cognitive beast.
Entirely. It requires a massive shift from passive reception to active creation.
Right, because when you switch from listening to speaking, your brain is suddenly forced into this intense multitasking mode.
Oh, yeah. The cognitive load is immense.
You aren't just recalling a word from that quiet collection in your heart. You have to retrieve the right vocabulary, arrange the grammar rules on the fly, physically coordinate your lips and tongue to pronounce things clearly, and simultaneously manage the sheer emotional panic of potentially messing up.
All at the exact same millisecond.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. It overloads your working memory.
Let's look at a really simple example from the material. Someone asks you, "What did you eat today?"
Okay.
As a passive listener, your brain processes that instantly. There's no friction. You know exactly what they're asking.
Sure.
But to answer, "I ate rice and chicken today," you suddenly freeze. And a crucial distinction to make here is that you don't freeze because you don't know the English words for rice and chicken.
Right, you know those words. You freeze because your mouth's motor cortex is not trained yet. Your mind knows the answer, but your physical voice is quite literally still learning how to perform the action.
I love thinking about it as a performance gap rather than a knowledge gap. It makes me think of reading sheet music versus actually sitting down and playing a grand piano.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, like you can look at the notes on the page and you can hear the beautiful melody perfectly in your head. That's your passive understanding.
Exactly.
But getting your hands to coordinate, to stretch your fingers independently and hit the exact right keys in real time, that active performance is a completely different physical skill.
It's totally separate.
Knowing what a C minor chord sounds like doesn't mean your tendons know how to physically execute it.
You wouldn't expect to just stare at sheet music for a year and then instantly sit down and perform a flawless concerto.
Right. You'd sound terrible.
You have to train the physical mechanics of your hands. And in language, you have to train the physical mechanics of your voice.
But that brings up a really frustrating human behavior. If speaking is this complex, coordinated task, why do our brains choose to freeze entirely instead of just, trying our best and hitting a few wrong keys?
That's the big question.
Why do we choose silence over a flawed sentence?
Well, it comes down to a massive psychological barrier. The perfection trap.
Perfectionism.
Yeah, we have this deeply ingrained fear of making mistakes. When you try to be perfect, you create an impossible standard. And the brain's defense mechanism against failing that standard is just to shut down completely.
So you just freeze.
You hold back because the fear of a grammatical error outweighs the desire to communicate.
Which is such a tragedy for language learners. The source uses a really grounded analogy here about a child learning to speak.
It's a perfect comparison.
Right. A baby doesn't sit in their crib, quietly studying grammar books for 3 years, waiting until they can form a flawless, complex sentence before they open their mouth.
No, they'd never speak if they did that.
Exactly. They just start using broken words. They use simple sounds. They point at a door and say, I go there.
And look at how we react to that. When a child is learning to walk and they inevitably fall down, the adults around them don't point and laugh.
No, we clap.
Right, we encourage them, we support them, because we instinctively understand that falling is a necessary mechanism for learning balance.
Yeah.
Language learning deserves that exact same kindness from ourselves. If you say she go to school instead of she goes to school, the listener still knows exactly what you mean.
The primary goal is connection, not perfection.
Exactly.
I hear that. I really do. But I have to push back just a little bit on the baby analogy.
Okay, go for it.
Sure, a baby doesn't mind falling down because babies don't have egos.
That is very fair.
As adults, we are hyper-aware of looking foolish. If you're a 40-year-old manager sitting in a corporate meeting, or you're hanging out with native-speaking peers, that fear of embarrassment is intense.
It's real.
It's tied to our professional identity. We don't want to sound like a toddler. The stakes feel incredibly high.
This raises an important question, though. How do we reconcile that very real adult ego with the absolute neurological necessity of making mistakes?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, the reality is adult embarrassment is valid. It hurts our pride. But we have to recognize what happens when we let that ego win.
Which is?
Holding on to that fear simply turns into silence. You retreat into not speaking at all to protect your image. And the harsh truth is, silence teaches nothing.
Wow, silence teaches nothing.
Silence protects the ego in the short term, but it completely stars your language skills in the long term. You cannot grow active pathways in a vacuum of silence.
Which leads right into the next major pitfall. Because adults are so terrified of looking foolish and hurting that ego, they often retreat into what feels productive but is actually just safe. Silent studying.
Yes, and this is a massive trap.
It really is.
It creates this dangerous illusion of progress. Learners think, if I just read enough advanced grammar books, if I drill enough vocabulary flashcards, if I watch enough English videos on YouTube, eventually I'll cross an invisible finish line and become fluent.
But that's not how it works.
No. The research is absolutely adamant on this point. Speaking creates speaking. Passive studying will never, on its own, magically transform into active fluency.
There's a case study in the materials that illustrates this perfectly. It's about a student named Tom. Now, Tom was doing all the right passive things and doing them well.
She was a very dedicated learner.
Exactly. She could understand complex English dramas without subtitles. She spent her entire commute listening to English podcasts every single day.
Right.
Her internal passive library of words was absolutely massive. She felt like she was on the verge of total fluency.
But then came the moment of truth. In a very low-stakes environment, her teacher asked her to simply introduce herself in English.
And Tom completely froze. Total paralysis. She said nothing.
And it wasn't a lack of knowledge.
No. She knew all the words required to say her name and her hobbies. It was a total lack of physical practice. When her teacher asked her if she ever practiced speaking out loud by herself, Tom admitted that she didn't because it felt strange.
Felt strange. That right there is the crucial barrier. Feeling strange, feeling uncomfortable, feeling silly alone in your room. That is the exact boundary where neurological growth happens.
So because Tom avoided that discomfort, she developed a habit that plagues almost all adult learners.
The translation detour.
Oh, the translation detour.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I imagine bypassing this detour requires somehow turning off my native language entirely, which feels almost impossible when it's the operating system my brain has used my whole life.
It is hard. The translation detour is when you hear a question in English, you translate it into your native language in your head, you formulate your brilliant answer in your native language, and then you try to translate that answer back into English before you finally speak.
It's exhausting. And think about the cognitive latency that creates. It requires an enormous amount of mental energy. You are running every concept through a totally different language center in your brain before routing it to your mouth.
It's exactly like trying to drive to a destination using a terrible GPS that reroutes you through 3 different towns just to get to the grocery store across the street.
That's exactly what it is.
The friction is exhausting. You're sitting there translating. There's this awkward pause. You can see the other person's eyes starting to glaze over. By the time you finally arrive at the right English words, the conversation has already moved on.
You missed your window.
You missed it, which just makes you feel more awkward and triggers the freeze all over again. So how do we actually bypass that mental detour? How do we stop translating?
To bypass that massive detour, you have to actively build direct neurological pathways between a concept and the English word, cutting out the native language middleman entirely.
Okay, but how?
You start remarkably small. The framework suggests a tactic called naming your reality.
Naming your reality.
Yeah. You just look around your immediate environment. You look at a cup on your desk, and you consciously think, this is a cup. You look out the window, see the weather, and think, it is raining. You smell dinner and think, the food smells delicious.
It seems almost too simple. Like, obviously I know it's a cup, but what's actually happening in the brain when we do that?
You're forcing a brain to associate the physical object in the real world directly with the English vocabulary.
Oh.
Usually you see the cup, think the word in your native language, and then translate it to English.
Yeah.
By intentionally naming it in English the second you look at it, you're reducing that cognitive latency. You're slowly erasing the hesitation.
And the next step to escalate that is narrating your day out loud.
Yes.
So in the morning, you just say 5 simple things out loud to an empty room. I woke up early, I brushed my teeth, I made tea.
Exactly.
In the afternoon, you describe your current actions. I am eating lunch. I am sitting at my desk. At night, you summarize, today was busy.
The absolute key phrase you just used is out loud.
Out loud.
Because as we touched on with the piano analogy, speaking is profoundly physical. It is physiological. Your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords, your breath control, they all need actual muscle training.
We're talking about muscle memory here.
Yes. Neurologically, we're talking about myelination. When you repeatedly perform a physical action, your brain coats those specific neural pathways in a substance called myelin.
Okay.
And that makes the signal travel faster and more efficiently. You cannot myelinate those speaking pathways just by listening.
Right, you can't learn to balance on a bicycle just by watching the Tour de France on television.
Such a great way to put it. You have to get on the seat and pedal.
You have to physically move your mouth around these unfamiliar phonetic sounds. Watching is not enough. You must listen and repeat aloud. Repetition is what moves a word from your passive vocabulary into your active vocabulary. For example, if you learn the word beautiful, you shouldn't just highlight it in a book. You have to actively use it repeatedly in context to build that muscle memory. This flower is beautiful, your dress is beautiful, the weather is beautiful.
Yes, that repetition ensures that the next time you genuinely need to express the concept of beautiful in a real fast-paced conversation, your mouth already knows the physical shape of the word.
So the muscle memory takes over, bypassing the panic.
It completely bypasses it.
But let me ask you a highly practical question, putting myself in the shoes of someone trying this out in the real world.
Okay.
Let's say I've been naming my reality. I'm doing my best. I'm in the middle of a sentence with a native speaker, and my brain just totally drops a crucial noun.
Oh, the worst feeling.
It just evaporates from my working memory. That's the exact moment the amygdala hijacks the brain, the panic sets in, and you're terrified of that awkward, stretching silence. What do you do in that exact moment?
Well, what's fascinating here is that native speakers experience this too.
That's true, we do.
We forget words all the time.
Yeah.
But the workaround is a linguistic concept called circumlocution.
Circumlocution.
It basically means talking around the word. If you forget a specific noun, let's say the word umbrella, you do not panic and freeze. You do not stop the conversation to furiously search a dictionary app on your phone.
Right.
You just describe the concept of the word using the simple vocabulary you do have access to. You say, the thing we use in the rain.
The thing we use in the rain, that is brilliant. Because the person you're talking to will instantly connect the dots and say, oh, an umbrella, and hand it to you.
Precisely. Because, again, communication is about creativity, not perfection. You still successfully communicated your need, you kept the flow of conversation going, and you did it entirely in English, even without the perfect vocabulary word.
So knowing all these mechanisms, naming reality to bypass the translation detour, narrating your day to build muscle memory, using circumlocution when you forget a word, that is all incredibly empowering knowledge.
It is.
But fluency requires consistent daily execution. You have to actually build the habit. And the source material provides a really fantastic roadmap to start building this habit today without feeling overwhelmed.
Right. It's framed as the 7-day challenge. And it only requires about 5 minutes of speaking out loud a day.
5 minutes? Anyone can do that.
What's brilliant about this structure is how it conceptually groups the cognitive load. It doesn't ask you to debate philosophy on day one.
Let's run through the progression because it is so smart. Day 1, you just introduce yourself.
Thanks and easy.
Day 2, you describe your room and the objects immediately around you.
Right.
Day 3, you talk about your family. Notice how the challenge starts hyper-local. It's entirely rooted in your immediate physical reality and familiar concepts, which keeps the cognitive friction incredibly low.
But then it slowly expands outwards.
Yeah.
Day 4, explain your daily routine. Day 5, describe your favorite food. Day 6, talk about your abstract dreams or career goals.
It's getting a little harder.
And finally, on day 7, synthesize a memory and tell a short story from your life. By day 7, you're managing complex tenses and narrative structure, but you built up to it gradually.
5 minutes a day. But there is a secret weapon attached to this challenge that makes it actually work, isn't there? The 1-minute recording secret.
This is non-negotiable. You have to take your phone and record your voice speaking English for just 1 minute every single day of the challenge.
Which, let's be fiercely honest, sounds like an absolute nightmare for most people.
It does.
Hearing your own recorded voice is already universally weird. We all hate it, let alone hearing it in a language you feel clumsy and vulnerable in.
It will definitely feel awkward. You will cringe at first. But the purpose isn't to sound like a professional broadcaster giving the evening news.
Right.
The purpose is to establish an objective baseline to track your progress. When you're just practicing in your head, you can't measure improvement.
That's so true.
But when you listen back to day 1 compared to day 30, you will actually hear the physical changes. Your voice will be clearer, your pronunciation sharper, and those translation hesitations will be noticeably shorter.
Hearing that tangible, undeniable progress provides the crucial motivation you need to keep going when it gets tough.
Absolutely.
You also have to fiercely protect that practice. We have to be realistic about the fact that sometimes the people around you, coworkers, friends, or even family members, might laugh when you start talking to yourself in English or making grammatical mistakes out loud.
It is an unfortunate social reality, but you have to remember that people often laugh at things they do not understand or things they're secretly too intimidated to try themselves.
Yeah, projecting their own insecurities.
You have to insulate yourself from that negativity. The ego will want to retreat to avoid the laughter, but one day, those exact same people will respect the fluency and confidence they once laughed at.
It all comes back to a massive shift in mindset. We're warned in the sources to never, ever say the sentence, "My English is winked."
Yes, because words have immense psychological power over our self-perception.
They really do.
When you say, "My English is weak," you're locking your identity into a permanent state of deficiency. You are literally training your brain to believe you're inherently bad at this, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Instead, you have to reframe it. You train your belief by saying, "My English is growing."
My English is growing. I love that.
It frames the struggle not as a permanent weakness, but as an active, temporary state of progress. Growth begins in the mindset before it ever physically appears in the voice.
But we know that shifting a mindset is always easier said than done.
Right. Which brings me to a very common hesitation I know listeners are feeling right now.
What's that?
Well, a lot of adults listening to this deep dive are probably thinking, okay, the neuroscience makes sense. I see why I'm freezing. I love the 7-day challenge. I'll definitely try it as soon as I brush up on my verb tenses and feel just a little more confident.
Oh, that's the classic trap. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that hesitation is exactly backwards. Yeah, it's the ultimate trap. Confidence does not come before speaking. You cannot wait for it to arrive like a package in the mail.
Right.
Confidence comes after speaking. It's the psychological reward for surviving the awkwardness and taking the action, not the prerequisite for it.
So what does this all mean when we pull all these threads together from the passive collection of words in your heart to bypassing the translation detour to the active myelination of your vocal muscles? What's the core takeaway here?
The core takeaway is that your English voice is already inside you.
It really is. If you can understand the words coming out of our mouths right now, the foundation is completely built. It's just waiting to be heard.
Do not wait for perfect grammar. Do not wait for your pronunciation to be flawless. And certainly do not wait for your fear of embarrassment to miraculously disappear, because it won't.
No, it never does.
You have to start with broken words.
Yeah.
You have to intentionally embrace the awkwardness of narrating your morning cup of coffee out loud to an empty room.
And as you do, I want to leave you with a final lingering question to ponder long after this deep dive is over. Psychologists often say that our personality shifts slightly depending on the language we are speaking.
That's fascinating.
Right. Our humor changes, our assertiveness adapts, our tone finds new rhythms.
It is entirely true. So if you keep holding back your words out of fear of making a mistake, what entirely new, confident version of yourself are you hiding from the world?
Wow, your new voice might just have something amazing to say if only you give it the permission to speak. So the next time you feel that terrifying blank mind creeping in during a meeting or a conversation, remember, you aren't failing. Your brain isn't broken. Your voice is just learning how to physically play the piano. Keep hitting the keys. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.